Welcome back to another episode of Pushing Back Cars with me, Paul Melon McFadden. Hope you guys are all well out there. I hope you all have been getting after it in your way and taking care of business and looking for areas where you can come into power with some integrity and chase the goals that are important to you. I'm still buzzing from last week's conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Carr, my rugby mate from the Yorkshire Regiment in the UK. He came on and just seriously laid down some markers with just an absolute class in integrity and authenticity and being willing to share about a lot of hard stuff, and just some great leadership lessons were embedded in there. So this is the part 2, and we're going to welcome him back. Jimmy, how are you, mate?
Very good. Very good. Thanks, Melon. Thank you.
We've peeled you away from peeling. You're in there getting the parsnips and the Brussels sprouts and everything going for Mother's Day.
Prepping Sunday roasts, yeah, and trying to score some brownie points, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a household tradition to have a Sunday roast with us, and I tend to do those domestic duties. But you know, today's a special day. It's Mother's Day in the UK, so I've got to step up.
Happy Mother's Day to all the mums in the UK and for those people around the world who celebrate. And well done for you, Jimmy, for stepping into the breach, the most difficult of tasks. And we just better quickly welcome our regular contributor, Mike. How are you going there, mate?
Hey, what's up, guys? Everything's going really well. I'm on vacation for the weekend. I'm up in Washington, D.C., and got away, and I'm doing some museum hopping. And man, it's been fun. I'm a big kid when I'm not at work. I'm not ashamed of it. And I went to the International Spy Museum yesterday and got to go around and see like how spying and espionage and everything's been used throughout the world and how it's influenced so much. And even currently today, especially more than ever with cyber stuff. So it was really interesting. Mm-hmm. And then I went to the Illusion Museum, which is, like I said, a big kid where you go in there and you can take funny pictures and do all kind of goofy stuff. So that was nice. Hit a few pubs, some good chicken parmies there, Melon. That's how you can judge a good pub.
100%.
And then after we're finished recording, I'm going to go to the National Mall, go to the War Memorials, check that out, Lincoln Memorial, and then cap it off with the Natural Museum of History. So nice little getaway before the upcoming departure from the States.
Well, it sounds like a great trip, man. Speaking of upcoming departures, this is going to be, I think, Mike, you and I have been doing this for 4 years, or close enough to it. It's in the month of the first episode 4 years ago. And every one of these, well, I've been living in Saudi this entire time, and this is going to be my last one from Saudi. Next one we record, I'll be living back in the town of my birth in Melbourne, Australia. So very exciting, but there's been just a massive amount of admin to get through, and still more. But yeah, departures and transitions, I think, is probably the theme of what we're talking about. For those of us joining now who haven't heard episode 1, I recommend just pausing this one and hitting episode 1 so you can get the backstory of Jimmy and the leadership piece. Episode 2, this part 2 with Jimmy, is now going to focus on the transition. So changing state, being a military man for 22 years, and then transitioning out. And I did the same thing after 17 years with the Australian military, and I'm just about to do the same thing again, transitioning back to life in Australia. So all of us are going to face it at different times, and hopefully we can pass on a bit of gouge, a few lessons, and maybe even some areas where we maybe could do it better if we were to do it again. But Jimmy, do you want to kick off there? You're a colonel in the British military. You've had 22 years. You've experienced all kinds of postings. You've spent a lot of time with the US Army in the US. You've had multiple combat tours. You've had a whole lot of staff and personal development training in that time. And there you are at 22 years in, and you're looking forward at your transition. So you want to maybe just fill us in with a few details of your backstory?
Yeah. 22 years military service, and if I could, so on reflection on last week, I've got to be honest. Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, when every night this week, I've struggled to get to sleep on the back of doing that podcast, because I've just lay there thinking about what I said, and kind of buzzing from it because I said a lot of stuff that nobody knows about. That I've had to live with a lot of that stuff that I revealed, and it was really cathartic. And I felt like this weight had been lifted from me. And I've never really been one to kind of, expose myself and, try and keep my own issues in, I suppose, or my past. And I was buzzing. And every night whilst I was lying there in bed, I was just reflecting upon what I said, what I could have said. And yeah, I could have said so much more, I think, and I could have said it a lot more articulately and coherently, which is what I'll try and do this week. So, it's the first time I've ever truly believed that talking really is a good thing. And so, if you've got any pressures, any stresses out there, and one of the things that I touched upon quite a lot last week was, soldiers that are that I had the honor and privilege of leading, who had their own personal challenges and unfortunately decided that suicide may have been or was the better option. And if you're feeling like that, don't feel like that. Talk, release those demons, engage with someone. Don't be shy. We're all here to help. Everyone's got burdens. Everyone's got challenges. 8 billion people on the face of the planet. Everyone knows someone that's going to go through something at some point in time. Be a good dude. Be a good human. Talk to each other. Help each other out. Don't be so aggressive. Anyway, on that note,
very well said, mate. Very well said, Jimmy.
Thank you. So what I think that we want to touch upon is obviously, leaving the military and that transition. And so if I can just give a quick overview of, my military life. So I commissioned from the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, which is, a basic leadership or, leadership school. You then, as I commissioned into the infantry, I then went and did a 3-month course, which was specializing in infantry platoon commander tactics and doctrine and leadership. And then I joined my unit in the north of England, and then we were soon posting to Northern Ireland, and arguably my first 2 years at regimental duty was spent in Northern Ireland doing counterinsurgency, counter-terrorist kind of activities. In that time, I managed to get myself on a jungle warfare instructor's course out in Southeast Asia. Great, a great leveler in terms of being on top of your drills, your personal administration, your soldiering, and at that, I was kind of thinking, everything that the reason why I wanted to join the army, that those realizations are starting to be realized and come to fruition. Being a soldier, doing some really good low-level skills and drills activities on operations and then environmental. Hot on the heels of Northern Ireland, I then went out to the Balkans and did a tour in Kosovo and Bosnia. Returned from there, went on a light role reconnaissance platoon commander's course, which I'll touch upon in due course. And then some staff training. Did a bit of, and then I did a machine gun platoon commander's course. So for 7.62 GPMG in the sustained fire, along with 50 cal. We were WMIC based machine gun platoon. And then I did UK Special Forces selection and failed that. And then went to Iraq, did a pretty kinetic tour in Iraq for 7 months or so. Then I went out to Sierra Leone for a year, expanded on my jungle warfare training, background, and then returned back to regimental duty after Sierra Leone, having attempted Special Forces selection a second time, failed again. But I'll come on to that in due course. Went back to Iraq, then got a job as a staff officer at a divisional headquarters in the UK. Went to Afghanistan on an operational tour. Then got a job working at our Army headquarters, so a kind of Forcecom equivalent, where I was responsible. Well, I was a captain within a team who were responsible for deploying UK personnel on operations globally for a 2-year period. And in that period of time, we had Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya was kicking off. We had short notice deployments to Somalia, as that was kind of becoming a bit more volatile. Mali was on the rise, Congo problems, and then we had routine operational deployments, across the rest of the planet, Falkland Islands, Cyprus, Southeast Asia, etc. So, and added to that, there was also the London Olympics, which the military provided a lot of personnel towards. Please. So we had a lot of military personnel providing security to the London Olympics. Margaret Thatcher passed away. There was a state funeral for her. There was G7, G20 summits. So there was a lot going on over that 2-year period. And I've got to be honest that was probably one of the most enlightening and personally and professionally developing jobs that I had. After that, staff college, 2 years, and which followed with 2 years at 10th Mountain Division, with a year in Afghanistan, some time down at Fort Polk, Louisiana, subunit command, company command with a mechanized infantry unit back in the UK. So a completely changing discipline from light infantry, and then back out to the States for a year at National Training Center in California. And then I went and did a language course with the British Army, studying Arabic, and then a posting out to Saudi Arabia, working with the British military mission, training the Saudi National Guard, and then that was when I decided to leave. So why did I leave? At the time, I thought I was leaving for the right reasons, and what that looked like to me was, the world was changing. I worked primarily within a defence engagement capacity, which meant that I was probably going to spend the majority of my time posted overseas. And ultimately, you're seeking to sell UK PLC as a nation of choice for providing equipment, defence equipment, training. And reputations, and also getting, that nation sending their people back to attend our training establishments. And ambushes left, right, and centre.
It's Mother's Day. You're allowed to have kids around.
Thanks. And at that point, I kind of thought that, there was so much going on globally that, when you're in a defence engagement role, you're competing against everyone else, every other nation where there's UK personnel, to try and get people out there to deliver training or support activities. And my next role was looking at being defence engagement. It may well have been a defence attaché somewhere, and I kind of thought, why am I sort of going to go into one of those roles and attempt to sell things where I perceived that there was a real struggle to resource activities that your force array had, those deployed individuals trying to deliver defence engagement apparatus to host nations. So I was slightly despondent about things. And then I just thought, well, now's on the back of COVID. Now is the time to try and seek to change. I was in my mid 40s. I knew that I was going to leave the army at some point in time. It comes to all of us. And I thought, why not be proactive about it and try and seek to have a career change. And at that point, I had an interview, as I said last week, with a motorsport organisation, and I really thought that that was going to come to fruition, and it didn't. I'd made it through to the final two. I thought I had a good mentor there that was going to be able to sort of help me out. And it didn't. And at that point, I was they basically said no. I was unsuccessful, and at that point, I was about 6 months out from leaving the military, 5 months out from leaving the military, and that was a kind of oh fuck moment, to be honest, where I thought, now what am I going to do? And I basically had 5 months to try and sort out my strategy, and I didn't have one. I hadn't even thought about it. I hadn't even thought about what I was going to do. I just thought I was going to breeze into this job in motorsports, and it didn't quite work out. So I submitted an application form to see if I could rescind my notice to terminate with the military, and I was told, no, you've got no skills that we require. You're out of the Manning forecast. You know, au revoir. And because you're kind of all about output, and you need something that's tangible to look forward to grab hold of, I just spent 5 months applying for jobs. Fortunately, an old mucker of mine from battalion had just put on, you know, social media, we're looking for a project manager, anyone looking for a job, and I kind of said, yeah, I need a job. And he hooked me up with his boss, or another guy, who I went down, had a cup of tea, cup of coffee with, walked around the building. He showed me what they did, and then came back and said, you know, do you want the job? And I kind of obviously had to go through interview processes and all that sort of stuff, and jump through the HR hoops. But I was really fortunate that he was willing to take a gamble on me and offered me a job. Now, and that's where I work at the moment.
Jimmy,
in between,
real quick, I just want to kind of like inject some perceptions, or misperceptions, I should say. You know, you just listed off an amazing and impressive 22-year military career, getting out as a lieutenant colonel. As an enlisted guy coming up, there's a perception that a lot of the senior leadership, whether it be senior enlisted, like, you know, your E9s, or especially the officer level of 05 and above, that everyone's kind of set up, that your management skills are more desired, you're experiencing, you're networking, you know, all these different stuff, even education, right? That the perception is, it's like, man, I'm just an enlisted guy. Everyone else has it made when they get out. And it's conversations I hear all the time. I also hear, you know, stuff around my job is because we're, quote, special, end quote, in the military, that we think we can just get out and go anywhere, and people are going to throw 6 figures at you because of something that you previously did. It is not the case. And Jimmy said it really well. It's like your skills and everything that you did within the military was for that job. In civilian world, like, the hard reality of it is, you're not jumping out of planes, you're not blowing stuff up necessarily. You're not going out and doing 7.62 machine gun courses and everything to help out, you know, your local Starbucks or whatever it is. You know, it just doesn't correlate. So I guess my point is, you know, the whole gist of this, and from my side, from Melon's side, from Jimmy's side, and Raf too. Raf would talk about it all the time when he got out and was doing pilot stuff with the commercial airlines. Nobody cares about what you did before in the military. It's what can you offer me now, and how can you help us now with our business?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you know, the funny thing is, and I said it at work a couple of weeks back, you know, I applied. So when I left the military, I wanted to do something completely different. I really wanted to get into the sports sector. You know, that kind of what I perceived as being facilities, close team collaboration, cooperation to enable, you know, a team of people to enter a field of gladiatorial contest where, you know, victory was ultimately the gains that they were seeking to do. And I wanted to be a part of that kind of bigger organization. And it's hard to make a break into that. You know, I've applied for loads of jobs within the sports industry as, you know, project managers, as, you know, some kind of leadership and business development, commercial. And it's really, really hard because you've got no background. You know, I've got 24 years of employment history, but it's irrelevant employment history. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you couldn't have transferable skills into those environments, but you're unproven. And that's where the difficulty is being a proven entity. And a lot of employers out there will look at military guys and they'll think, there's probably a bit of baggage going with this guy or girl. You know, they're in the military, they have this stereotype perspective of, you know, they shout, they scream, everything's do this, do that, you know, hierarchical, everything's orders, and it's not like that. You know, we're humans. We've got to get people to do things that they wouldn't necessarily choose to do on a day-to-day basis. But it's not all about screaming and shouting and, you know, fatigues and press ups and all that sort of stuff. It's about collaboration, and the challenge is alive, irrespective of your rank. Because these employers are looking for the right people. You know, you could have MBAs, you could have PhDs, you could have nothing, but ultimately the next person that you're going to work for, you probably already know. And it's about that network, having a network that makes introductions or that pull you into their organization, because they know that from a character side of things perspective, you're a good cultural fit to their organization. And that's what it's largely about. Nobody wants to, you know, if every ship has a see you next Tuesday, and if you don't know who it is, it's generally you. And so, you know, if you're looking around and you don't know who the you know, the toxic entity is, then it may well be you. So, you know, that's why organizations ultimately look at the individual, and that's what they want, is the character, and what they bring to the environment. So, you know, what can you do about that? How can you address those things? How can you prove that, you know, you're you are someone that they should employ? And so I think that, you know, my snippets to people that are undertaking transition, and like I said, everyone's going to do it. As humans, we transition on a daily basis. You transition from daylight to darkness. You transition from wearing clothes. You transition in seasons. You go outside, it's raining. You go outside, it's hot. That's basic transition. But you're managing it. You're seeing where there's risk. You're seeing where the threat is, where the opportunity is, and you've got to identify how you're going to transition from a job, which is the military, into another job. And what are those transferable skills? And so you might not necessarily have any specific transferable skills, but things like turning up on time, looking the part, being disciplined, loyalty, trust, integrity, selflessness, all of these other values and standards that you hold as an individual, you can then expand upon that on your resume, your CV, and say, right, you know, loyalty is one of the things, or trust is one of the things that I really hold dear, and you example it. And if you can give a tangible, credible method by exampling that, and demonstrating an achievement. So there's a process called the STAR process: situation, task, the approach, and then your review, your reflection afterwards. What was the outcome in effect? So if you can approach things and demonstrate where you've had achievements, and everyone's achieved something, but it's, you've also got to measure that against the industry or the organization in which you're going into. So for example, a lot of military folk struggle when they're going into a private sector, commercial, corporate industry, because everything's about money. You know, how much money have you managed? How have you balanced books? How have you turned profit? What's your revenue pipeline? What's your profit and loss kind of understandings? And for military people, it's like, hang on, money, you know, someone else does that. You know, what do you mean you don't like the fact that I was a jungle warfare instructor? You know, I'm a stud. And they're like, jungle, it's pretty irrelevant. I want to know how you're bringing business in and how you're making, you know, you're winning business and how you're creating profit for the company going forward. And that's one of the things that you kind of got to get your head around. That's obviously going into a company. If you're gonna, you know, be a one-man band or start up a company, you've also got to think about money. How are you going to pay your wages, to pay your bills, to put food on the table? How are you going to continue to generate income? So, you know, I don't want to make it sound like it's all about money, but it is. That's the private sector. When you're in the public sector, like health services, military, police, whatever, you don't have to, you know, unless you're right at the top, you don't have to worry about balancing books necessarily. So anytime anyone gives you an opportunity to get on a course, or have an involvement in managing finances, be it a small project or you know, some kind of responsibility, custody of bigger budgets, take that opportunity. And you know, when we're, you know, as an infantry guy, you know, we're a bit arrogant, you know, in terms of, well, you know, we're at the front end of delivery. We're at the tip of the bayonet, tip of the spear. This is what we do. Everyone else is kind of a combat support entity. And everyone else is a combat support entity and there to facilitate, you know, the punch of the military, be that, you know, cavalry or infantry. But it's those support entities that really have those artisan skills, trades, disciplines, you know, be them, you know, bookkeepers, engineers, intel guys, cyber, communications. I mean, there's 199 roles in the US Army, and, you know, the cavalry and the infantry probably have 10 internally. So there's 180 roles elsewhere out there that you know, you can truly expand on and bring to the marketplace.
I like that. I like that you brought that up, Jimmy, because, you know, you nailed it on the head when you're like, man, tip of the spear, you're arrogant a little bit within the military. You know, I experienced that, and I've learned and seen over time where, you know, in the US military, 90% of jobs are logistics and support, 10% of the military are combat jobs. And just a fun fact, about 2% of the 10% actually see combat, which is pretty interesting. So just to give you a scale of like how the whole machine is built and running. One of the things I've always told my younger guys is you always treat the support as well as you treat your other teammates, because one day you're probably going to be working for them.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, I don't know anything, you know, when it comes to the cyber or intelligence side or logistics, and the private sector is nothing but logistics and finances and money and shipping and doing all these different things to support another type of action arm, not war fighting, but, you know, execution of, you know, sales or like whatever it is. We don't fit into that part. So, man, you better be humble. You better ask questions, and you better get educated on what other people are doing and not just be so prideful, especially towards the end of your career. But, you know, one of the things I've learned too recently is, you know, we always have the quote of everything ends one of two ways: the way you want it to and the way it does. So if you're planning a 10-year career, a 20-year career, a 22-year career, you may get injured tomorrow. Something may happen and your career's over. Now what? You know, it's not the hand you wanted, but it's what you got. And
Yeah.
who are you going to lean on? And your network, like Jimmy's talking about, man, your network and the people you know are probably your biggest and best currency coming out of the military.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Networking is everything. And, you know, I don't mean schmoozing and I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, when you go and do a course or you're with a unit, you know, be a good dude and be a team player and be good. Because that will resonate with those individuals when you then spread to the four winds and they catch wind that you're leaving and they're like, hey, I've got an opportunity for you. And genuinely, you know, since I've left the military, I've only really truly appreciated that. Because you know, I could be stroppy. Everyone can have a, you know, a stroppy day. But it's absolutely about, you know, treating people with civility, courtesy, and being the man that says, I'll do that, or yeah, you know, I can help. Being proactive, being positive, and that will gather. And the other thing is like your first job is never going to be it might not necessarily be another 20-year career job. It might only be there for a year, it might be there for 2 years. But don't see that as the next big thing that you're locked in on. Because the private sector is quite fickle. They're happy that people change jobs, you know, relatively quickly because that's where promotion is and diversification.
On that point, Jimmy, I've had a couple of mates, a couple of people that I knew, a senior officer to me and a very close mate, who both transitioned out, and it was like a bit of a shock to people. Like, they went to work where? And really what they were doing were planning a few steps. And it was 12 months for one guy and 24 months for the other.
Yeah.
And it was really looking at, how do I get a level of recognition on my military stuff? And what I need to get into is exactly what you said. I need to get into managing a pipeline of business. I need to get into sales. I need to get financial exposure to then move on with all my management, leadership, planning, organizational behavior, looking after people, all that stuff that I'm good at. I've got to get this bit done now. I need to get some sales, business development experience to then move into where they were looking sort of, it was the 12 and 24 month point that they were looking at. Yeah. And both of those guys have gone on to have very successful careers. And you and I talked about one of them offline the other week.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you're sadly mistaken if you think that you're going to go straight into a 6-figure salary, unless you're a general, and they, you know, some company wants a non-executive director or chairman to come in who's, you know, they got a 2-star or a 3-star stud or an E9 stud, that's going to come in and step up. The rest of us are average. We're back into the marketplace. We might have been good in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force or the Coast Guard. We may well have been studs in those environments, but we're back into the workplace environment as unproven entities. And so, as you said, Melon, you know, you've got to be prepared to get back to the bottom of the ladder and you know, take some steps to get to where you want to get to. And that's all about developing your strategy. So as you're making that transition, what is it that you want to get to? What's your ultimate goal? And that might be, you know, I've got to get a job first. Well, how are you going to get a job? What courses do you need to undertake, or how do you need to prepare yourself? You know, getting your resume sorted, getting some networks established, getting those job applications submitted, and be prepared that many companies will not even respond to your job applications. And And if you do get a response, request some feedback. What was it about my resume that didn't resonate? And if they're prepared to provide you with feedback, most of them nowadays just say, due to the high volume of applicants, we don't have the time to respond to your application. But if you do get some response, then seek feedback, because it hurts, when you just keep getting rejections. It can beat you down. And it goes back to that mindset. So, get your strategy. Where do you want to get to? Where do you see those stepping stones? How can you generate that path? And it's quite interesting because a lot of people sort of say, "Oh, you're leaving the army, not ambitious any longer. You don't want to do it. Why are you leaving?" And it's like, actually, to leave the military demonstrates ambition, because you've got to then go and chase it, and you've got to evolve and become malleable and adapt to comments that can be, subjective or objectively disheartening. So how do you get over that hurdle? You may not seek counseling, or you may get some counseling back from those applications that kind of, kicks you when you're feeling down. And that's transition. That's the phase one, the difficulty of trying to get a job. Phase two, once you've landed that job, is like, hang on a minute, this isn't like the military. Where's my purpose? What's my sense of purpose? And, the team, this is all about, generating profit. Where's the camaraderie that I once belonged to that kept me motivated for being in the military? You lose that camaraderie, you lose that sense of purpose, that identity that you had in the military, that rank or that person that you were. And that's a hard one as well. And a lot of people have sort of said that sense of purpose is left questioning and for want. And so you got to strip it back. And, I'm no psychologist or philosophist, but, if you look at Maslow's theory of hierarchical needs, where you've got physiological security at the base level, and then you've got safety, and then love and belonging, esteem, self-esteem, and then at the top, self-actualization. Sometimes it's a bit like Jenga. Some of those blocks in each of those layers might be getting knocked out, but your self-actualization, the one at the top, is where you realize who you are and what you want to do more to become not better, but change and improve or enhance or adapt to the new environment that you find yourselves in. So, look at, for the listeners, look at Maslow's theory of hierarchical needs and see where you are on that level, and what you can do to change things, to develop your strategy, and then your newfound working environment, and where you see yourself, and tie that in with someone like Adair's leadership model. There's three trinities within that, the task, the team, and the individual. Who are you? What are you bringing into the equation? What do you need to, enhance yourself, develop, progress? What are you contributing to the team? The team has that sense of purpose, that belonging, that cohesion, that camaraderie, and the aim or the mission is all about what you're doing, that sense of purpose, and what the outputs are. And you get that trinity squared away and understand it, and hold that in line with something like Maslow's theory of hierarchical needs. You can start to develop.
I've seen a really good one, Jimmy, by a guy that covered him in one of my MBA subjects, Dan Pink, and he's got a triangle, and he talks about, it's called Drive, is the book. And in there, he's got there's three parts, and there's autonomy, so that's the ability to derive your own life. There's mastery, so being good at something that you value, and then purpose. And if you can get those three things, you are going to be motivated. Every human on earth is going to be motivated. Those three things are there.
Yeah.
Your autonomy is going to, it's going to be something you're going to have to negotiate and find. And there's going to be a level that you're going to get to where you can control your own life. And there's going to be stuff in all of us where we're going to get tasking from above. Mastery, getting good at something that you value is difficult. And it is a lifelong journey for all of us. But there are going to be skills that you can look for and elements when you're doing that strategy that you were talking about earlier, Jimmy. Where do I want to get to and how am I going to get there? And what are these skills I'm going to have to master? And then the last one is the purpose. So having meaning in what you do, being able to connect what you're doing with something that you actually value. This is going to have to be for a lot of us when you leave the military, and it was certainly the case for me. You're going to have to generate this yourself, and it's going to take some of your horsepower. You're not going to have 100% bandwidth available for just pushing on with a task. You're going to have to sometimes, the purpose might be that you're really getting right down in the weeds of stuff that you value as a family man, as a father, as a husband, as a wife, as a sister. All of those roles might be where you're finding your purpose. And it might be okay that when you're at work, you're there in service of delivering something to people that makes a difference, that there's, you're going to have success as long as you're solving problems for people and you're in service. There's heaps of purpose you can find in that, but it might be your really deep stuff is no longer, I've got this identity that came up and got bestowed on me by the military. It might be that the purpose is something you got to generate yourself, and that might be the one that we find hard.
Yeah.
But those three things of autonomy, mastery, and purpose from Dan Pink have been something that I've really found beneficial and a great way to frame things.
Yeah. And that mastery's, what do they say? It takes 10,000 hours or to become a true master. Jordan Peterson said, do the small things and do them really well. And there's loads of great anecdotes out there that you can use as motivators and just short reference points. It's like Alec Baldwin in Glenn Ross when he's making the sales pitch. You have those little acronyms that you can just keep looking at and identify, right, what do I need to keep reviewing and reflecting upon to get to where you want to get to. But I mean, for our enlisted guys, the ones that find themselves that they may not necessarily have promoted. I mean, the US military is incredible. The opportunities, the GI Bill, where individuals can go and get a degree, either for themselves or for their family, is incredible. The British Army doesn't have that. It's got something similar, but it's hard to tap into. So you go and get 4 years worth of work experience working with the US Army, any military arm of the military. You've got discipline. You've got the ability to survive in day-to-day life. You're relatively self-reliant. You know how to turn up, how to address people. Courtesies, and you leave the military and then you go off and get a degree, and that's when you're then mastering something, and that's when you can then focus on what the career field is that you want to get into. I applied for a job with a football club. I applied for a few jobs with football clubs. That's in soccer, and the fact that I was a light role reconnaissance platoon commander or a machine gun platoon commander or I'm a jungle warfare instructor. They didn't need that in BD. So yeah, and there I was thinking, hey, why don't these guys want me?
Yeah. One of the things that I've heard a lot in businesses, and I went to a really big convention in Vegas, and it was a bunch of CEOs and people famous from sports to business, like the NFL, Shutterfly, all these other companies. And they're talking about like what they're looking for in military service members. For me, I was looking at special operations veterans, like who's looking for guys like me, as options. And one of the things was you guys are very good at delivering old school values and new required delivery methods. because this
Yeah.
generation is completely different. It's a really big, push button generation where we want it now without the work.
Yeah.
But every company out there wants the same thing. They want people with discipline. They want people with passion and motivation and organization skills, communication skills, all these different things. And it's like, you guys are a little bit more better at that just because, we're used to going over and building guerrilla forces to fight other countries and going in and doing what we call FID, or foreign internal defense. Like we're trainers, we're instructors. We do a lot of that versus, with respect, being in the infantry and they're like, hey, you guys are going to flank and attack. There's a little bit more to it. So it's like, okay, that's really interesting. The other side of it too, that I've really learned about, you mentioned competition, and you have to realize the environment you're going into is just like, oh, hey, I'm coming out of the military. Well, on average in the US, every year, 200,000 people get out of the military and retire. That's your competition, plus the other hundreds of thousands that are still looking. You're not special. But, if you're going off of your resume and a badge or some ribbons or an experience that you had, that's going to be cool to get you in the door. It's going to be cool to tell your hour-long cool guy combat story or what you did. And then what? Once you're in the door, what are you going to do in the room? What's going to set you apart? What's going to catch their attention? What's going to be like, you're different from the other 2,000 veterans who came from the same line of work that just applied here, but there's something different about you. What is that about yourself? I go through that all the time of like, dude, what's going to set me apart? Why do these guys want me? Why do they even want to talk to me? What's different? And you got to have 360, 720 awareness about the people around you and that environment. Because if you just go into it just thinking, expecting, you already failed.
Yeah, I mean, you're constantly doing a human terrain analysis against what your competition looks like, where the marketplace is being flooded, where they're going. A lot of veterans in the States, they obviously retire to places like Texas, Florida, Wyoming, states that are a bit more kind of, it's beneficial to be a veteran in. But, if those 200,000 are all heading to Dallas or Houston or, wherever it is, Austin, the places are going to be saturated. So, you got to look at where your competition's going. And you've got to put, as you've said, Mike, how are you a differentiator? What is it that you can bring to the party? What's your USP, your ultimate selling point? What makes you the person that they want? Because an interview, they're enticed. You've got their attention. You just need to make them make a decision. And here's a top tip to people that are about to undertake job interviews. It's called the soft close. So at the end of an interview, and I wish I knew this, at the end of an interview, if when the interviewers say, is there anything else that you have any questions regarding this position? And if you've got a couple of questions, that's really beneficial. But your final question is okay, you've provided me with a lot of information, and I've provided you with my information. Is there anything else that you would like to know more about me at this point in time? And if not, is there a reason why we cannot close this right now and secure this position? Words to that effect. So basically you're saying, do you need to know anything more about me? And you need to provide me with a reason why we cannot proceed, and you cannot state I'm not the person for this job. It's about them choosing you forcing them to choose you right there and then.
Yeah.
The soft close.
Yeah, I've also heard that is being called interview the interviewer.
Yeah.
And opening up to that two-way conversation of not just sitting in a chair getting beat down by questions and be like, all right, cool, thanks, hey, have a good day, bye. And there's zero conversation. It's a one-way street. not everybody takes to that. Some people are just like, hey, we have a lot of applicants and that's all you're getting. But it doesn't hurt to throw in that extra question and be like, when you started here, you know, what did you think about this company and how did you progress? And instantly you get that rapport of like, oh, this person, and it's a tactic, let's be honest. It allows them to speak about themselves a little bit. And you gain that trust and connection a little bit about like, hey, this person's actually interested in me as a person versus just the job, you know, and it does build rapport on different levels. So that's really good advice.
Great interview technique. The 2 times that I've transitioned out of the Australian military and then now going home, I did quite a long bit of planning ahead of time. And I took both times about 12 months to sort of apply for the job. And the process I went through was like, while I've got a job, I want to make sure that I'm doing this right. And I did a lot of networking, and there was an education piece. And my advice for people would be to plan it strategically, like Jimmy said. Think about maybe 1 or 2 steps that you're going to take. Look at education, as you talked about there with the opportunities in the US with the GI Bill. If you're British or Australian or other, you might not have access to that, but it might be a self-education piece. You're like, right, what? And it's not going to be off the top of your head. It's going to be based on concrete conversations. What are the qualifications I need to make this strategic step that Jimmy's been talking about work? Like, what is the skill that they want or the qualification they want to see that's going to allow them to hire me? And then the third one is the networking. And so that is getting in communication and leaning on your network. And there are going to be people, if you've had, you know, sort of, I had at that time 17 years in the military, and now it's even more. There's going to be people in key positions, and it's finding out where they are, what the roles are, because the roles that you're looking at, as Jimmy said, here's a strategy and a bit of planning. You should be looking at who's in and around these organizations and then doing your research. So for me, I took like 12 months both times with a bit of planning and organizing and education and networking. That was sort of the steps that I went through.
And I'd add to that, Melon. You know, you got to really identify where your strengths are. Know your weaknesses, because you can develop those, but know where your strengths are. And so, you know, everything that you've just said there is like your strengths are planning, visualizing where you want to get to, and the mechanism by which you can get there. But the other thing is you know, like I said, I didn't want to stay in the defense realm, because that was a chapter. I wanted to now move on. I wanted to get into the sports industry. You know, the doors were not opening every time I knocked on one. So what was my strengths? Well, I'd just done 22 years in the military. So why don't I get into the defense sector? It doesn't have to be forever, but I need to pay the bills. So utilize your experience. And the amount of defense companies that are out there, you know, you've obviously got the big ones, but you've got a load of new, smaller ones that are developing innovative technologies that the kids of today's day and age are all over. Get yourself a project manager qualification, or, you know, software writing or whatever, and you can do this kind of thing on LinkedIn Learning or, you know, wherever else, or, you know, as part of your transition. And then market yourself with your strengths. And I've reviewed a lot of resumes for people, you know, from enlisted guys all the way up to 1-stars, and they've all defined themselves as senior project managers or senior this and senior that. It's like, one, you've run projects, you absolutely have run projects, but you haven't managed projects. So you haven't been responsible for the financial side of things. And that's what everyone's looking at outside. So calling yourself a senior project manager without having the entirety of a project management experience is somewhat false. Now, there's no reason why you can't put that on your resume, but you've got to be prepared when someone says, so how do you manage an estimate at completion that's running at, you know, minus figures against what your projected profit base is going to be? You're like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So, you know, look at what courses, qualifications you need to undertake, depending upon what your strategy, your career path is going to be. You know, it might be a tree surgeon, it might be, you know, a surgeon, it might be, you know, something completely different. But know your strengths. Like I said, you know, highlight them against your values and where you've achieved those, and put them on your CV, your resume. But also play to your strengths when you're applying for jobs. You know, staying within the defense realm, because you can talk the language. You can talk to, you know, the military as a stakeholder, and you can also translate that into the private sector, you know, spiel. I had one of the software writers send me an email at last week, and I sent her an email back just saying, I do not speak software. Can you give it to me at Johnny age 5, please? And she was like, yeah, sure, no worries. So yeah, play to your strengths, and that may well be the defense injury or industry, or, you know, whatever your previous experience is. We have a lot of guys and girls that join the military as a later career. Well, go back to what you were in beforehand and meld the two experiences together, and, you know, something else will be spat out at the other end.
Fantastic. I think there's some real wisdom in what Jimmy's talking about here, talking about play to your strengths and really having a bit of an honest look at yourself and saying, what skills do I have and where are they going to be most useful? And it could be that, okay, I want to end up in X, I want to end up in medical services, I want to end up in housing, I want to end up in property development. But you're like, at the moment, my skill set is really a stovepipe of defense or first responders, because it could be plenty of those listening as well. So it could be that adjacent industry is the place to go to then get the civilian accreditation, the civilian recognition that you're then transitioning for the second step, which is what both of my mates did. So looking at the adjacent defense, or, you know, the industry that you're familiar with a view to stepping forward out of that once you've got something on your CV that people are going to understand. And no joke, you will actually have been gaining skills and breadth and depth, and you will have been stretched and learned new stuff in that transition as well. So, Jimmy, we're probably close to the end of the time here. Are there any other points that you haven't dropped, or frameworks you just wanted to leave with now? I know that you have done this successfully now, and you've no doubt reflected on how it's gone. And is there anything you wanted to leave everyone with just before we wind up?
So I think the main thing is you got to rewire your brain a bit, and you know, because life is a drill, and so, you know, if you're a creature of habit and you like routine, and then all of a sudden that routine is upended, and you start to find yourself in a bit of a chaotic situation that you're not in control of, you've got to be able to rewire your brain. And, you know, the neurochemicals that are in there, like, you know, dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, or whatever it is, serotonin, you know, all these things that are you know, that we can release. So especially endorphins and dopamines. If you're feeling the stress, they say, you know, go for a run, because then you can clear your mind, you can think about things. And you can start to, you know, endorphins actually decompress, reduce stress levels. So, you know, you can think a bit more clearly about things, rewire your brain, and reapproach. You know, in the military, when you're doing your MDMP in the UK, question 4 was always, has the situation changed? Is it viable or is it not viable? And if it's not viable, you've got to tear up that plan and start again. So rewire your brain, look at all of the apparatus that's out there to enable you to get to where you want to get to. And if there's changes on that path, then you've got a contingency plan to be able to overcome that obstacle, or you just tear it up and start again. Take your time. Don't be in any hurry to set yourself up for failure. Set yourself up for success.
Bloody great. Bloody great. I love that.
Awesome.
We finished with one of our points that we love and refer to all the time, is that the psychology is driven by the physiology sometimes, and getting yourself back into a state of positivity through exercise. Heaps of us in the military first responder community have had that as part of our normal routine. It can be the first thing to drop out when you get stressed, and it's the thing you need the most in those times. So don't fall away from the routines that have worked for you.
Yeah.
Wow. A bit of a masterclass there from Jimmy with transitioning. I've had a bit of experience, and I'm doing it again right now. I have called Jimmy and talked about this exact topic. We've had conversations offline, and his words have really rung true with me and have helped guide me in what I'm doing next, which I'd love to update you on once that's underway. But before we close, Mike, was there anything that you wanted to leave the listeners with?
I just really appreciate Jimmy coming across talking. I just hit 17 years the other day in the military, so I'm in the fourth quarter of my career, and just dealing with an injury and a lot of setbacks and a lot of stuff's changing in my career. I'm definitely planning on this transition already, and I'm 3 years out. I know so many guys that wait till the 6-month mark or even the year mark, and they are just way behind the power curve. Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. Start getting uncomfortable early. Start getting out, asking questions. Network. Have these types of conversations with people that have already gone through it or are going through it, and check yourself. If you're not getting feedback from these companies, go to the people who've been told no and ask them about their feedback, and maybe they can listen to you because they succeeded. Hold each other accountable. I guess the last piece too, man, is the camaraderie piece. You may not find the same camaraderie that you had in the military, but it doesn't mean you can't create it elsewhere. Veterans communities, organizations, charity work, get-togethers, whatever it is, man. The only reason that breaks is because you choose to leave it. You can always cultivate it no matter where you go if you choose to.
Absolutely.
Testify. You might find it at a rugby club, Jimmy. Be a local rugby club. All right. Well, on that note, Jimmy, thanks very much for coming in again and just helping plant some seeds, hopefully, for people out there. They may not need this episode right now, but as you say, it's going to come down the pipe for all of us. So guys can dog ear the page on this one and bookmark it, and they can come back when they need it.
Yeah.
So
can I just close with thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and I hope that if anything I say resonates with anyone, hit me up on LinkedIn, and I will do absolutely anything and everything within my power to help people out. That's what we got to do. We can do more, and we should do more to help each other out. And in the words of Winston Churchill, never, ever, ever give up.
Bloody great. So we will have Jimmy's contact details in the show notes. And if you have any questions, you can always send a message to us at Pushing Back Chaos, and we'll pass it on to Jimmy. So for the next week, take care, get after it. Please share this out. I'm sure that you all know people who are going through this process or staring down the barrel of it yourself. Please share, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next week, take care.